Okay. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm originally from Israel. That's my accent. That's the reason for my accent. So hopefully we'll get used to it very fast. Now, I would like to speak about several issues. First, to speak a little bit about risk. Then to speak about some of the basic processes that drive agriculture and what do they mean and what are their implications. And the last thing, what can be done. Now, I've been teaching risk management at Berkeley for about 35 years. I don't know if most of you know, but we have in Berkeley a very strong ag-econ department, and a lot of people in Iowa State and others are our graduates. And I really think that risk management is the key to understand agriculture and natural resource systems. And I'd like a little bit to speak what type of risk we have, what do we do about them, and then how changes affect the risk environment in which we operate. First, what is risk? Generally, people measure risk, financial risk, by variance, some variation around an average. But this measure is not that important. You care about downside risk rather than upside risk in most cases. You care more about having low prices than high prices. You care more about having high input prices rather than low input prices. So to some extent, there is a big element of asymmetry, and you really have to realize it. So a lot of time, what really you care about is not so much the variance, but the downside risk, some measure of downside risk. That's the first point. The second thing is there is a big difference between ongoing risk, which is 10% variation, and acute risk. When you have acute risk, that's something that can really cause you a lot of problems. Generally, a firm has about 5 to 10% margin of profit, or even a little bit more. So if the risk is within this margin, it can survive. But when you move to the 40%, it's a problem. Now, some risk can be countered by market mechanisms. And for example, when prices go, when output goes up, prices go down. And when output goes down, prices goes up. So there are these correlations. Sometimes you have mechanisms like future and forward contract. What you have to worry about are risks that don't have either market mechanism or any other mechanism that can counter them. So you really, when you look at risk, you have to think about what are the risks that matter and what are the risks that cannot be mitigated. Now, there are generally different types of risk, and for every risk there is some sort of a solution that can work to some extent. The first risk that people worry about it, statistically it's probably the most important risk for a field crop grower is yield risk, output per acre. There are many ways that you can deal with it. You can deal with it by crop insurance. You can deal with it by pest control. You can deal with it depends what type of risk. If you have a pest problem, you can use pest control. If you have water uncertainty, you can use irrigation. If it's a risk that cannot be controlled by input, then you can buy insurance. Generally, crop insurances are something that, on average, you pay quite a lot. So if someone has a lot of money, like if you are a big-time orange growers, you basically will eat the yield. You, on average, will do much better if you take the risk yourself rather than buy crop insurance. So to some extent, a lot of time you can tell people, sometimes the cost of insurance are so high, don't do it. Now, output price risks are related to prices of goods that you sell or earning, and there are many mechanisms you can do it: future, forward contract, price insurance. Generally speaking, these type of insurance are much less costly than yield insurance. So if you are clever, you can find a way to insure yourself. But again, don't pay too much for insurance. But again, if you insure something, it's better to be, in my view, it will be better to be price rather than yield. Then, again, input price is the same thing. Now, labor price, that's something that can be really problematic. In California, labor price variation was probably much more traumatic than anything else. If you remember when after the Bracero program was canceled in 1962, we had incredible amount of changes. Tomato harvester, unionization, a lot of things happened at the same time. So in labors, we have a lot of mechanisms that you have to be very sophisticated to deal with, and sometimes collectively, labor contracts, mechanizations. To me, from the industry perspective, the issue of labor, reducing labor uncertainty is crucial. What happened with migration policy now is an incredible source of uncertainty for farms. To me, what will happen, either the state will invest immensely in the university and everyone else in developing new generation of mechanization, but if we won't have reliable supply of workers in a lot of the labor-intensive crops will have a lot of problems. When you have a situation that farmers in Salinas cannot harvest strawberry, you are in trouble. So labor is another source of risk. Then you have all these issues of technology. You buy a lot of equipment, how you can protect yourself. One way to protect yourself is with warranties. Another way to protect yourself is with brands. The big problem with technology is that when technology fails you may lose yield or crops, etc. So a lot of time, it's not only to have a good warranty, but to have a good dealer that provides you a backup. And that's something that is really important, that you have to educate people. You buy a new tractor, you have to make sure that not only that you have a good company and you have a good warranty, but if the tractor or combine doesn't work, there is a backup. That is very, very important. The other thing is the issue of market availability. A lot of time, especially when you speak with perishable, you need to have a market. You need to have someone that will buy for you. And that's the reason that today contracts become more and more important. We teach our students in a world of markets, but in reality, for most farmers, you operate in a world of contracts. And contracts will increase. I think, to me, one of the most admiring things about our agriculture is the way that the industry works in Salinas. We basically provide vegetables to all the world, and the precision is immense. And you basically, if you are a grower, you provide the lettuce to the right time, and the shipper has it in the right time, and the supermarket it in the right time. Everything based on contract. So being able to find the good buyer and the right contract is really important. Then you have the issue of fit, and people don't realize how fit uncertainty is important. Fit uncertainty means that you have a technology that is great, or a product that is great objectively, but it's not necessarily great for you. What do I mean? A lot of time you have a technology, but it doesn't work for your organization. So not everything that is hot you would adopt. It's like dating. There are a lot of people that are great, but you basically need to date to find someone that fits you. So to some extent, there are very many mechanisms that basically allow you, that you can use to test a product before you buy it. And if you fail, you have money-back guarantee, you have demonstration. So to some extent, really people have to recognize that when you buy a technology, you have to test it, you have to be very careful. From my own experience, more than one organization failed because they basically went to the wrong technologies that didn't fit them. So risk is not about price, and output risk are simple. Technology risk can be much more dangerous and much more complex. You have to be aware about it. Then you have issue of risk of policy, and that's the reason that you have lobbying, and then you have the other thing that I'll speak later on, the risk issues of quality. Quality really matters. If you have uncertainty about quality, you get lower prices. So to some extent, increasing uniformity of quality becomes very, very important. Now, some risks can be addressed better than others. Like some, as I said before, some are linked, especially when they are correlated. Price and yield are linked. If you are rich, you can address a lot of risk. I said before, the best way to address risk is basically to use your bank account to absorb it. I work with several companies. So some companies, when they have low output price and high input input price, stop advertising. They kill themselves. It's better when you have a situation that the market is not good for you to increase your marketing. To some extent, it's really good to have some sort of capital for operation rather than to cut operation because of cash flow. That to me is the key element. Now, policies can help a lot, and you can use policy to help you, but sometimes the price of policies is higher than the benefit of policy. Like if you're a farmer in California and you make a commitment to join commodity program, but it really limits your ability in terms of choice of crops, I'm not sure that it's a good idea. Another thing that is very important is formal versus informal mechanism. Social networks still help. A lot of time, people develop cooperative, people have mutual systems of assistance, still families help. So these are a lot of mechanisms. You develop all this friendship to help to one another. And these mechanisms that work all over the world. People now do studies in many developing countries to see how you have risk management within families. But I've been working in California now for 40 years, and I know that these informal mechanisms within community are very important with a mechanism to address risk. And most important thing is adaptation. And adaptation is really important. People now speak about climate change, and obviously something happens. And there are several ways that you adapt to change. And I really think it's not only climate change. The world is changing. The point is this. China is an opportunity, and it's also a challenge. The best example is strawberry industry in California. China now produces much better strawberries for processing than California. All their capacity for processing is incredible. But they cannot produce good processing fresh strawberries. So to some extent, we can double our fresh strawberry industry, and we don't have a lot of chances when it comes to processing, or we can reduce it. So you have to adapt. You cannot say, because I've grown processing strawberries that are not as good, I will fight the Chinese, because you wouldn't be able to succeed anyhow. We have in a world market, and we really need to be able to adapt. But there are many ways of mechanism to adapt. First is innovation. To think about new products that always oversee the reality. Adopt technologies. So adoption of technologies is not only adoption of technologies, but also adopting technologies from other regions. If you have changes in weather, some region in California will switch to patterns that exist in other regions. It will become very hot. You may find a situation that all the wine industry will move north. So generally, a lot of time when something changes, try to see what someone else that has been operating under this condition is doing. A third mechanism is insurance. Insurance is a mechanism that allows you adaptation for the short run. A bigger mechanism that is better is trade. A lot of time you realize, okay, things change, so I expand producing A and I start buying B. So, for example, like the issue of dairy in California, I am not sure for how long. One thing I'm convinced, that the future of California is an high-value crop, fruits, vegetables, etc. The more we educate people, the more income is growing around the world, the more people want fruits and vegetables, and we have relative advantage there. I am not sure how long our dairy industry will last. I did my dissertation on dairy in Chino when Reagan was governor. The industry, actually Reagan was quite tough on water quality regulation. Then for about 20 or 30 years, regulation of water quality stopped. In the last 10 years, they move up. Then you have all the other issues that relate to land use and energy costs and the high price of grain. So you may have a situation that high-value crop will do better. Dairy wouldn't do as better. So a lot of time, you change your trade pattern. This is basically a speculation. I didn't do tough analysis, but you realize the fact that people are doing dairy for a long time doesn't mean they have to do it together. I'm a student of the dairy industry in California, and if you look at what happened to most dairies, historically this was the industry that people develop a dairy and wait until the city will move to the dairy and then they sell the land. So we have dairies 100 years ago in an area called Wilshire Boulevard or Rodeo Drives. You have cars in Rodeo Drives. So what happened is we really have a situation that we adapt. And industries are changing. And some industry will grow, some industry will decline. As I said before, I think for value per dollar, the highest that we get is from a high-value crop. And if we move, when I started, there were about 1 million acres of high-value crop. Now we have 3 million. If we have 5 million, we have enough water, we have everything, we can basically increase our agriculture by 60%. So these are issues that are quite interesting and important. Now, the other thing is migration. Many parts of the world, you can see migration. In some areas, if things become very big, you see people migrating from A to B. If climate change will really happen the way people predict it, some people will move to Northern California, some areas in Southern California would suffer. Again, the point is that there are all these mechanisms and you cannot be blind to change. And when change happens, you have to realize it. And to me, the key of a bank is to realize what is the direction that people are moving and what is the direction that are dying. And if there is areas that are dying, don't try to resuscitate them. I, for example, will worry about helping someone to have a home development about 200 miles away from San Francisco or Los Angeles because of the energy prices will continue to be high for a long time. So having a big development in Tracy is something that doesn't seem to be very economical. On the other hand, there are other opportunities. So understanding basically migrating and moving and changing emphasis across location is really crucial. Now, the agriculture is really affected by many processes, and I like to speak about them a little bit so we can really get a little bit of perspective. They include population growth, increased resource scarcity, climate change, environmentalism, consumerism, globalization, privatization, new science-based technologies, the bioeconomy. So let me speak about each of them. Population growth. The population growth is something that continues. It will be a global disaster if it lasts forever, but if we reach to 9 to 10 billion people, and I think that it will be something that's sustainable. And one good thing that we see is that in most countries, except for some countries in Africa, you reach the situation that children per woman reach the level of 2.53. So basically you move to sustainability. China is sustainable more or less. India will have a little bit of a rise. Pakistan is growing. So what happened is that we have two parts. First is population growth. The second is income growth. Income growth is more important from California perspective than population growth. We basically, the U.S. in general, U.S. agriculture benefited immensely from the increase in income in China. Now you have Indonesia, you have India, so the demand for commodities that we produce will increase. So that is one thing that we really have to realize. But what is good news for grain producers may be bad news for livestock producers. So to some extent, there is this element that if the price of output is going up, if whoever is using this output as input is suffering. So to some extent, one of the big challenges is to find a way to improve the efficiency of food, maybe use alternative type of feed for livestock. But to some extent, population growth will affect California and the rest of the world. From our perspective, if we are competitive, we can increase the dimension of high-value agriculture immensely. The value of land will go up. So this is one trend that is very important. The second thing that I think is probably more important is increased energy scarcity. Basically, the high value of agricultural commodities of energy increase the cost of production, increase the cost of input. and increase the price of food. I was one of the first that worked on the link between the price of food and the price of fuel. So what will happen is that people will continue to think about things like biofuel. If you think about it, till about 100 years ago, one of the main areas of agricultural production was to produce fuel. If you look at states like Montana, they were basically established as gas stations on the way west. Basically, people were growing barley and wheat for the coaches that went to California. All this Wells Fargo one from the commercials. Now we are moving to a situation that we may have much more use of energy, agricultural product and bioproduct for energy. It will be slow, it takes many years, it's the issue of government, it's the issue within power, but I think that's something that is very, very important. Since a lot of agriculture is petrol-based, there is a need for technology that would reduce the reliance on petrol. There is much more value, for example, in nitrogen fixation, much more value in alternative to nitrogen-based pesticide. I will speak later on. In my view, GMOs will become more and more important because they will reduce the reliance on chemical pesticides that are based on petrol in protecting plants. So I think that's another change that is very, very important. Now, personally, I think all these propositions that basically put put labels on pesticides to me on GMO to me are very problematic. I really think that they are not good for California, they are not good to the nation, and not good for the world because they really reduce our ability to increase energy scarcity. Climate change, we spoke about it before. Climate change again provides a lot of opportunities and it provides a lot of challenges. I think that what happened is, suppose you have about 1 or 2 degrees change in temperature, then some regions that are very affluent will be in problem. The Napa Valley may have to move. Some areas in San Joaquin will have problems. Some area in Northern California, we have to look at them differently. If I was in agriculture and I would think about how do I plan my future, I think about, maybe I start to think about building alliances, buying land. If I look at investment, if I look at land values in some area, I will think twice because vulnerability to climate change. California a lot depend on the state. Up to now, we have a fantastic state because we harnessed water that are basically stored in the winter and we move them to the south. But if we don't have enough snow, unless we build some big dams, all this water will go to the ocean and we'll have floods. If we don't do a lot about climate change, we may not be able to be here because of floods. Sacramento is very vulnerable to flood. So climate change and climate change policy is important. It may not be there tomorrow, but being able to have a capacity to deal with it is very important. And for me, for people that try to look at long-term sustainability and survivability, when you give people 20 years loan, you have to think about what happens if things happen, if things change. On the other hand, there will be a lot of opportunities, new crops and varieties, new regions. We did a study about what happened to global agriculture with climate change. Altogether, nothing much. But people won't be able to produce, let's say, in some part of Mexico, and there will be a lot of opportunity in Siberia. But would the Mexican move to Siberia? So the big problem is movement, transformation, ability to adjust. And that's a challenge of climate change. Then you have the issues of environmental concerns. A lot of, yes?
Professor, on the carbon trading issue, my understanding is that Governor Brown and possibly the legislature is looking at the carbon trading as an opportunity, to fund high-speed rail. Does that change your slide in any way if that's what they end up doing?
To To me, it will be quite interesting. See, I personally, I'm not that convinced about high-speed rail.
I share your enthusiasm.
Yes. On the other hand, I think if they let's put it this way, I was working many years in Washington on issues of climate change. From generally, California historically was favorable to carbon tax, while the East Coast was against it. So to my extent, if you can move, that's my personal view, if you can move, let's say, from what we call progressive taxes, high taxes on income, and move to energy taxes, it may be a little bit regressive, but it will stabilize the income flow of the state. So to me, any earnings that the state have should go to general revenue. That's my personal view. We have a huge deficit problem. And any earnings that the state have should go to general revenue. Building a rail is very romantic, but we have planes. And the other thing is, I know someone that from a French company that is actually thinking about the rail. Now, if you've been in France and you took the rail, it's fantastic. But California is not France. In France, the rail goes between Paris to Lyon. In California, if you like to build the rail, every little community wants the rail to stop. Then it cannot be a fast train rail. You know, now there are things that they can do. For example, you can really improve BART in the Bay Area. BART, I think, has been a success story. No, I have no dispute about it. But again, you can have. To me, it's like with advertisement with cigarettes. The worst thing that you do is you decide a tax on cigarettes. It's not a bad idea to have tax on cigarettes, but don't use a tax of cigarette to have stupid advertisement against smoking. Use it to cover general revenue. See, money has value, and to me, that's the point that's going on. Now, I can later on, I actually think that one thing about Governor Brown is that at the end, that he's much better in cutting costs than raising taxes. So at the end, he will cut a lot. From the university perspective, he probably, of all the governors that he had, he cut more in California than any governor that in my lifetime. So it's really interesting what will happen. But I think that building the rail for sure shouldn't come. It will be totally self-defeating if you build the rail based on the carbon tax. If you increase the price of gasoline, or even stabilize it, to say, okay, guys, we pay $4.50 per gallon, no matter what. Then people know what they deal. I think California will be much better off rather than to go up and down and then people go and buy a house in Tracy because they think that transportation will be cheap and 2 years later they go bankrupt. I think if we had 10 years ago $4 a gallon, we wouldn't have the financial crisis. I think a lot of the financial crisis was that people moved deep to the valley, took agricultural land, built all these palaces, and low-income people move in these palaces and needed to have incredible transportation costs. This is my own research, but I would like to speak about what I want to. Okay. So anyhow, again, environmental concerns generally are, in my view, are a pain but are a benefit. Altogether, California agriculture benefits from environmental constraint more than they lose, and I tell you why. We basically we can produce the highest quality products with the minimum amount of use of chemicals. So we can sell our product as green, clean, sustainable, whatever stuff, and other people cannot do it because we have agriculture in an artificial environment. We have a desert with water. In the winter we have you have frost, so we kill the pests. So we can. No other country would raise all these notions of organic farming because they cannot produce organic farming. So we basically, so environmental regulation increase the value of our product. On the other hand, some of them are, in my view, are problematic. I think the issue of water regulation, we really have to deal with it in a reasonable way. I don't think that we can really keep California agriculture hosted to to a small number, to some of the endangered species regulation. But altogether, environmental regulation, I think we have to look at it in both sides, have been something that has been very useful because the state is able to sell high-value product. And one thing that you know about agricultural product, the margin matter. If you can sell, if you have an attribute, right or wrong, that people think that make it valuable, you can make a lot of money. So if you look at most of the most advanced agriculture in the world, they basically call themselves green, not because they are green, because they can produce it and others can't. So environmental regulation, environmental concern, and consumerism are two trends that you have to take into account. If you are a farmer, you have to support farmers that are able to take advantage of these things. If people are paying a premium for taste or nutritional content or whatever, and you make more money on it, it's good for the farming industry. Now, I'm not sure that it's good for humanity. I think that organic farming, from a humanitarian perspective, is a disaster. It's a little bit strong, but because it reduced food production and people in Bangladesh are dying. But at the same time, the clients that buy California agriculture will pay more. So to some extent, you really have to recognize that this trend happened. People care about taste, people care about convenience, people care about ease of preparation. We move to a world that you don't really think about, you don't buy a chicken to kill it, you really want to have the chicken clean and neat and has a certain type of taste. So you move to agriculture, the value added matters. If you ask me, as someone that has been in California agriculture, if there was one thing that I think was problematic, I think that agriculture in California didn't adjust as fast to consumerism as environmentalism as in other countries, and we didn't make and people didn't make as much money as they could. I think it was a generational issue. But I think, look at what Tyson did. Tyson realized the importance of Tyson Chicken Company. And we have a company like Foster Farms that made the same thing. They realized that people want different type of chicken and they capitalize on it. I think a lot of time people continue to grow cotton and a lot of traditional crop, and we gradually move to high-value crop. I think that we didn't take advantage of opportunities, let's say, in Japan and the East Coast, because we can produce the best product. So to some extent, these are two trends that people have to take care into account, and people that are able to capitalize on market opportunity will benefit. So development of niche market, a specialty crop, is really important. I think one advantage of San Luis Obispo is to produce sophisticated farmers that are able to adjust to markets. Another thing is the industrialization of agriculture. A lot of people speak about, urban farming. All of it is nice. But we move to an agriculture that is much more depending on technology. And this is an important trend. And industrialization has a lot of elements. One element is the element of emergence of brands, emergence of high-quality brands. And for example, if you are a banker and you have a bunch of farmers, if they have a good brand, it's much better than they have a bad brand. And when you have a brand, you have to realize what the competition and what the technology is doing. I remember I was a consultant for California Flower Commission, and I told them, I don't know, about 15 years ago, to have a website and start selling flowers through the web. And they say, oh, why? So what happened is that it took them about 5 or 10 years till they did it. And in the meantime, you have other people that sell flowers through the web. So I don't know if, I know myself, you have a birthday, you always forget a birthday. So now you lose the web and you look at someone. And if someone sells only flower, you buy flowers. But if someone sells the flowers and a little bear, you may buy the bear. So to some extent, basically, you have a situation that you have brands, you have industrial products, you really have to recognize all the opportunities and how technologies are moving. Also, industrialization of agriculture is that there is much bigger role for professionals. So you have two types of wineries. One winery that the person that runs it is someone who is a hobbyist, and another one that is using a professional consultant. And a lot of times the quality of the winery depends on the consultant. And that's something that is known in California, but you have to recognize when you go and evaluate something, Who do you rely? What are your sources of information? How you try to adapt to changes? How you see yourself 5 years from now? These are questions that you need to ask your customer. The other thing is heterogeneity. You have to recognize we don't speak about California. There are many regions. It's like with wine. There is even in Napa, there are different type of regions. You know, like you have Edna Valley and Alexander. There are all these little regions that affect the price of wine and affect the quality of product, and you really need to know it. Like if you have peaches in California, they are different based on brand and location. So recognizing it is very important. And the other thing is there are different type of farms. There are farms that are limited resource, retirement farms, residential farms. So the USDA is recognizing it. A lot of time you can do worse than to look at some of the the USDA publications about trend in agriculture. They recognize the diversity and the potential. Now, a lot of time farmers may make a lot of money by providing lifestyle. I think that many of the wineries in Napa and Sonoma make more money from the bed and best breakfast in the shop than they make from the winery. And I think in California, more and more farming become lifestyle. I wrote once a paper that was very controversial that I consider golf to be a part of agriculture. A golf course is basically you grow a crop. They are probably more precise. They use more input. And they use more modern technology than most other crops. So to some extent, what you really do in agriculture, you use a piece of land, you use input, you produce an output. The output can be food, it can be cotton, and it can be recreation. So I think this you really have to take into account. And a lot of times someone can mix several things. If you're near a city, you can use your farm for different type of activities. So to some extent, I think that the measure of a good management is how they can get maximum value for their resource. Now, if you look at California, land use in California, you basically have woodland. You have a lot of pasture and rangeland and cropland. Pasture and rangeland, in most cases, produce very little value. Some of it is really of low quality, but some of it has good potential. Now, if you look at commodities, you can see big diversities. You have dairy that is big, nurseries that is big, but the rest are high-value industries. There are many small industries that all of them have a lot of values. And altogether, you can really see that most of the values is, if you take animal product and field crops, most of the value is what I call high-value crops. Now, greenhouse and nursery in California is good. I think we can do even better. I remember if it wasn't for a bunch of Colombians that start to think about the fact that why don't you sell flowers through supermarket? It was a marketing study that done by Colombians from the country of Colombia, and then they started selling flour to Safeway. The California flower growers would still sell flour only through FTD. So I think there is a lot of potential in nurseries. There is a lot of potential in increasing vegetables and fruits. These are the high-value crops. And they are growing. Now, the other thing is that you see that a lot of that you have by some small farmers and some big farmers, but there is a lot of small operations that are part-time farmers, and that will continue. If you have 5 or 10 acres, you can work in Sacramento, you can work in Los Angeles, or you can work in Fresno, and you can grow something. A lot of the east side is this way. So you really, in many cases, you really have to look at the complete package, because a lot of time you give loan to people that are part-time farmers. Part-time farming is a long California tradition. If you look at the east side of the valley, you have a lot of small farms that are quite effective, and you have to recognize how they operate. And actually what you see is that because of the value of land, a lot of time, if you are an owner of a big farm, you a lot of times say, gosh, I should rather split it to a lot of small farm and make money selling the land. So I think in California, it's unlike in many other parts of the country, Because there is some, you can still operate at high value crop on 100 acres and have a contract, you can see some interesting structures. So, altogether, if you try to look at the cost, I think that the one thing, and it really is, that one thing that went up is energy cost. Now, water use vary by crop. And generally speaking, you can really see that for some crop, like strawberries or fruits and vegetables, water use is is a small share of production. So you can grow flowers or strawberries everywhere, as long as you can get water at whatever price. Other crops, like for example, alfalfa, depend on relatively cheap water. So as water scarcity increases, that will happen. Now, I personally think that we have quite a lot of water. We really need to increase the ability to trade water and the infrastructure of trading water. That, to me, is one barrier in the state. But when you have huge differences, you don't need to look at the number, huge differences in value per acre foot of water between crop, trading can increase a lot of value. There are a lot of water in the east side of the valley. There is scarcity in the west side. Moving it from one area to another will increase the value of agricultural production. There will be a lot of environmental objection, but I think it's even good for the environment because then you don't need new water projects. Water basically is still suboptimal in the state. Introducing, now I think another thing that I don't think that we do is we don't really reuse water. There is consumer resistance for it, but I think in many cases it's much better to reuse urban water for crops like cotton or for other crops because there are technologies that are doing rather than building all these canals that cost billions of dollars. So I think water is one area that we can really improve the use of. And yes.
I find it interesting that top 12 commodities as far as distribution of water usage, rice isn't even in there, and it's a very high user of water.
Oh, no, yes. No, yes. The point is the value of water per unit of rice is very high. But the point is that the rice growers have subsidized water. You know what's the best year for white growers? You remember 1993, 1991, where we had the first year of the water bank? Now, half the rice growers sold the water right to people in the south. And they really saved the trees in part of the valley. So to me, if you have a water trading tomorrow, most of the rice growers will sell their water. Well, they make more money now from the wetland than from the rice, and they depend on the rice subsidy. Actually, I was one of the people that started with the idea, came with the idea of the water bank, and some rice growers sent me a big sack of rice. They said, this was the best year we have ever had. So to some extent, people know about the issue about the water and the rice, it's there. You don't move it, but the value added is very limited, and you cannot use the land to other crops. I think that Jane knows much more than me about rice. But but if you look at strawberries, water value is very limited. So people adopt drip irrigation to increase the water. It saves a little bit of water and increase productivity, and it pays for itself. The same is with flowers. On the other end, if you try to look at pasture, water take a lot of value, and and when you will have water shortage, they will suffer. Another thing that is using a lot of water is some of the loans in some of the developments. I really think that from an environmental perspective, having all this urban spread in California is terrible. Transportation costs, water costs, and not to speak about vulnerability to energy prices. So this issue that vulnerability by crop is really important. I try to put it in different type of measures. You always have to compare crops in value per acre foot, value per acre, and then realize what crop are valuable and what are not, and then encourage people to move from crop A to crop B. I wouldn't be surprised if one day people will move to if the price of energy will be high, to produce in some areas biofuels or sugarcane or whatever. Because we have a lot of crop at the margin that are not that don't provide a lot of value. Now, the other thing is globalization. Globalization happened. Generally, historically, if you have war, if you have peace, people increase trade. You can have regulation, you can have union, you can have, but globalization can happen. And it has a lot of meaning. We have foreign direct investment. I think we benefit from foreign direct investment. I think Rabobank is probably the best thing that happened in many ways. It's one of the better things that happened to California agriculture. Bank of America at a certain time decided, after 1996, decided that they want to reduce agricultural exposure. Wells Fargo was always hot and cold. Rabo enter here. There are a lot of opportunities to California businesses, maybe to invest overseas. I think what we did with Mexico to developing an interesting block that basically produce a supply throughout the world is useful. So this provides a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenges. A lot of time you may have a sector that suddenly have competition from some other place, and sometimes you can use the WTO because of dumping, but altogether we will have other regions that legitimately we compete with us. So to some extent, California all the time need to be on the move, and to improve, farmers have to improve their performance. Japan is a fantastic market, but now we have competition from Australia. We could make much more money of Japan if we improve some of the product quality. Korea is a new opportunity. That's opportunities of globalization. Indonesia will be a new opportunity. We have a lot of product. Also, California agriculture can sell knowledge overseas. This is when you have a situation that people want to increase the value of the product, that's one area that we can go. We have incredible knowledge here, and I don't think that we capitalize on it. So globalization really matters. Now, as I said before, trade expand of agricultural trade and knowledge is something important. With precision farming, biotech, all this knowledge-based agriculture, that's something that we can sell. We can also sell management. So to some extent, California is a small state. We have a knowledge base that can apply to many other areas. So I don't know if people think about it, but I think that we made a lot of different in Chile. There are other areas of the world that can benefit from California knowledge, and I think I don't look only at the produce as export, but I think as a knowledge is export. Now, the other thing is privatization. Generally, the role of government is declining. Government should provide public goods. Government should provide some basic policies, but the goal of government is declining. One interesting point is the issue of extension. Our model of extension was designed for farmers for about 100 years ago, for farmers that had hardly any education. Now when farmers have masters from BAs and masters from Cal Poly or Davis or Fresno State, when you have someone from Cal Poly that run a farm, he really need a university specialist. You have a totally different type of extension. There is a lot of opportunities for researchers in campuses to interact with farmers. So you have to recognize what's the role of government. You need to have public-private partnership to develop knowledge. The government should do only the pure public good. So all these issues of the role of government is very important. Now, without government, I think California or the U.S. will be in trouble. I think one of the biggest advantages of the U.S. is that we had better governance than any other country in the world. The railroad, the highway system, the research establishment here at the edge of any other country. But on the other hand, excessive government is a problem. So letting government expanding the role of government in provision of private good, and reducing the role of government in doing other things is very important. Now, the other issue is privatization of technology development. Now, this is very important when it comes to agriculture because I think it's really crucial. Most of agricultural technologies, if you look at agricultural technologies, you have mechanization, it was done privately. Pesticides were done privately. Fertilizer was done privately. Seed was produced by universities. And seed was, in my view, the weak link. Now when we have all this new knowledge about genetics, the public sector doesn't have enough money, resources to develop new seed variety. The university developed the best technology, but in order to commercialize it, it has to move to the private sector. In the same way as in medicine. I think one of the only areas where the US is keeping an advantage is pharmaceutical. Why? Because we have the best universities in the world. So we have new research, it results in new product, and we are able to develop it. So to me, privatization of technology and taking university technology and moving it to the private sector is very important. There is a lot of resistance among farmers. They expect to get seed for free. The university now, to me, the private sector will be much more important, and I really think that it's really important to take advantage of new technologies. My feeling is that if the US, in my view, unsubstantiated reason would say, okay, we don't take advantage of GMO or other new technologies, at the end, China will take us over. We have about 20 or 30 years edge. But if we don't take advantage of it, someone else will take advantage of it. So to me, this link between what happened at the university, development industries that take advantage of it, development regulatory environment that is appropriate, is very important. I know that in Berkeley, Davis, and St. Louis, there are a lot of technologies that are not utilized, either because of regulation or because of industry resistance. For example, we don't have now a lot of GMO wheat because farmers are opposed to it. But to me, I think in the long run, we will lose not having it. So I think to think about the role, to look at technology in agriculture like in medicine. University come with ideas, private sector provide new technologies, and California agriculture will take advantage of it. We are always better off when technology is trending and we are leading it rather than someone else. And the point is this, the pace of industrialization depends on regulation, and regulation is important and it's needed and it's essential, but it has to be reasonable. So, if you look at so basically we read all this element of science and policy systems are growing, and what we really see throughout the world is three things that are really happening. Globalization, democratization, and openness. Things are moving throughout the world. You cannot keep things in one place. If you stay the same and you don't compete, you really lose. And the result is unemployment. If you want to have the highest standard of living, you have to have the best technology. So I can go more and more on this. So generally, you really need to have mixed government force with enlightened and active government, and I spoke about it before. The role of the government in terms of agriculture in California is important, for example, to help some of the small crops that don't have private sector support. Monsanto wouldn't develop something for strawberry. But if the state work with Monsanto together to provide incentives, suddenly you will have new varieties for specialty crop. To me, the main challenge of specialty crop is how you use public-private cooperation to take advantage of science and have much better specialty crop. Because to me, the biggest problem today is that people realize that fruits and vegetables are good for them. People are aware of it, but they are too expensive, there isn't enough. We can produce more and better if we really take advantage of knowledge. But today, a lot of this knowledge is private. It's not worthwhile for the private sector from the perspective of the companies that produce the product. But if you look at the companies that produce the product and California farmer, we can think about a lot of initiatives to have even more science-based societies that take advantage of new technologies. And that's the challenge. Now, why banks matter? Because sometimes they will be asked to finance it. A lot of it is financed by venture capitalists, but being able to understand some of the technology challenges in agriculture and support new initiatives will be great. I was involved, Bank of America provided the support for Tyson. And I think that was very creative because they realized that there was a new direction. Sometimes you really have new directions that are starting with new technologies and new products, and this is a big, recognizing it and identifying it is a big challenge. And it's a social service. Now, there are several new elements of emerging agriculture. First is precision farming. Precision farming is something that started 30 or 40 years ago when you start looking at drip irrigation and other things, technologies that change the application of the input by location according to ecological perspective. Now, with new information technology, with satellites, with all this monitoring, you try to develop systems that will increase productivity, reduce pollution, reduce residue. There will be always criticism of these technologies, but they are here to stay. We will develop them because we are close to Silicon Valley. That's something that California can both develop the technology and utilize it. And again, financing is very important. Having good measurement, and I think that's a challenge, to know which technology will fly and which won't is a big challenge. That's one thing that the university can help, to identify through relationship what direction can work, what direction can. That's a big challenge because you know what happened with technology. You think that a lot of companies will work, some don't. You have a Google and you have some companies that you forgot their name. So I think that's what will start happening in agriculture when it comes to precision. Now, the other thing is all these issues of eco-farming. All this idea that you use basic knowledge in ecology to utilize the land better. Now, one thing that is very important, I think the most important thing that happened globally is more sophisticated use of double cropping. What happened in Argentina and Brazil is that they use double cropping to grow soybean and corn or soybean and wheat. That basically, now, that was possible by the use of Roundup Ready soybean. But that basically increased the production of soybean on the world by 30-40%. Without this production, the prices of corn and soybean will be much, much higher. Now, that's something that is occurring in California. I think it will occur big time in the Midwest. The Midwest don't even think about double cropping. Now they start thinking about it. So these type of systems that basically almost recycle your resources will change farming. Biotechnology, we only know the beginning. We have technologies that basically fight pests. But if you look at the universities, if you look at some of the companies, there are traits that improve quality, traits that improve the nutritional intake of soybeans, so that you basically can feed more per unit, feed more cows and have less waste. Technologies that improve the shelf life. So to some extent, they need to be regulated, but if they be over-regulated, they will be killed. To me, I don't think that's the issue if it will happen, but why, when, and who will benefit from it. We can benefit from it as a state, as a leader in the technology, or it can be moved to some place in Asia. Europe gave up on it. But this type of technology is very important. Now, I look at corn. If you look at corn, basically we move from 20 ton per 20 bushel to 160. Now people speak about 300 because of innovations. And these innovations will continue. And I think that we may see, already we see 200 bushel per acre, and we may see 250 and even more. And this is because of technology. Now, the 1/3 of corn that was result of GMO basically save a lot of life. And this type of technology will continue because we'll have a lot of people. There will be some objections. The question, who will be smart enough to lead in this technology and who will give it up? And I think that's something that California has to think about. I can go more and more. Now, biofuel. Biofuel wouldn't have that much impact on California now because still it's low value. But it still have a lot of effects. There will be, it will take some time, but we will have cellulosic ethanol. People will start to use forest product to produce cellulosic ethanol. People may, we have a situation in California that we have a forest that basically has excess wood. Sooner or later, you will have regulations that you basically will trim the forest to make it more sustainable, less risky, and it will be a new source of wood. You will have different type of biofuel. Now, I think for California, I said before, biofuel is not that big. Globally, it's huge. More corn, more sugarcane, like you can have in Brazil 40 million hectares of sugarcane without affecting the tropical forest. So if biofuel is changing, it may mean that you need to develop capacity to use fuel from different locations. I think the ability to deal and to use alternative fuel is very important. I also think that natural gas will be a huge source of energy to agriculture. Now, so if you are a farmer, you have to think about agriculture. What are the new alternative fuel? What type of fuel can I produce? Fuel can be a money maker, yes.
Yes, Professor, in your judgment, can the biofuel industry stand on its own without government subsidies?
Okay, I tell you exactly. This is a good question. Biofuel in Iowa, now, at least for the next several years, why not? If you look at what happened in my view, now, I can give you a big... Biofuel is a very sensitive industry. Some years you can make a killing, some years you can lose money. So you really need to know when to go in and out because you have this, because the price of fuel determines what's going on. But if you look at farmers in Iowa, they can make money. They make end over fist. The subsidies of biofuel in Iowa in the last 3 or 4 years increased the value of land there. The only thing that they did was increase the value of land. Second generation biofuel, I think, should be subsidized because it will be viable. I think what happened with first generation biofuel in the US was a huge success story. The government subsidized the product, now the product can go off subsidy. It increased the price of corn, it increased productivity of corn all over the world. If it wasn't for the European ban of GMO, I think that we could have food and fuel globally. I was the first one that wrote paper about food versus fuel. Today, it's about time, in my view, to reduce the subsidization of corn biofuel. You need to keep the mandate because it assures that refiners something. You need to increase the production of corn in developing countries. You need to allow GMO, but I think that biofuel was good. And it also reduced the price of oil above what it could have been otherwise. And all the subsidization, if any, should go to second generation. Third generation is successful. The area where the subsidization is ridiculous, in my view, is Europe. Because in Europe, it's not that they are bad. They don't have something like corn. They try to subsidize biodiesel. Biodiesel is not profitable unless you use diesel from palm oil. I expect you will be surprised. In about 15 years, you see a lot of biodiesel coming from Africa when people are growing in countries like Ghana, palm oil that will be profitable. People start doing it. But growing biodiesel from soybean like we do or the Europeans do doesn't make sense. But corn ethanol works. And I think it will, so to some extent, the only thing that will stop corn ethanol is the issue of the demand for food. If we increase the productivity, there is no problem. The other thing that may change all of it is if we move to natural gas and the price of fuel goes down. But in the long run, maybe 10, 15, if you look at the long run, I think biofuel, we will produce agriculture to produce fuel. No doubt about it. It may be 10 or 15 years, but in banking, that's the only thing you care about. So some biofuel operations are viable without subsidies. You have subsidy, you increase the land value. And that's what's really the story with mainstream ag in the US. If it will be in Europe, it's a different story. If I had money, I would invest in what people are doing. They basically buy tractor land and grow palm oil in Africa because you have a problem growing it in Malaysia. But that's the story of biofuel. Now, the other thing that is, which is relevant to California is expansion of agriculture. You can use agriculture to produce fine chemicals through algae, to produce plastic. Okay, there are a lot of alternative uses that are happening. A lot of the discoveries are done in California. A lot of this stuff is too risky to be paid by commercial banks. But I know that some people now produce beta-carotene and commercially and make a lot of money. People produce vitamins, people produce plastics, and these things will continue. So to some extent, in state, if you are near Davis or near San Luis Obispo, I wouldn't be surprised to see very intensive farms that use agricultural land to produce high-value non-agricultural products. Now, again, the issue is regulation. Irregulation matters. You don't want to produce medicine in plants in a field. You want to produce it in a protected environment because here environmental concerns are important. But you may find that you will have much more nurseries that will provide contained environment to produce medicine, to produce a lot of other stuff. In the same way that now you produce insulin by some sort of genetic engineering, you may plan to produce this type of stuff. So it's not tomorrow, but it will be the day after tomorrow, and you have to be aware of it. And this type of initiative, in my view, will be an important part of agriculture. Now, this is one area that I show, one of the issues, why all these things matter. I have a study that really look at biofuel versus biotech. Biofuel increase the price of food on price of corn and soybean by average percent. Biotech reduce it by the same amount, if not more. So if tomorrow you ban GMO from the world, prices of food will go up by 30 or 40%, which means that California people will complain, but people in some countries will die and then we'll have wars. So to some extent, technology matters. All this stuff is really important. Now, if people in Africa will adopt GM corn and yield goes up, suddenly price of corn globally will move to about $4 or $5 per bushel, and biofuel will become more abundant. So all these issues are very, very important. Now, one of the big challenges that we have in agriculture today is the issue of regulation. Too little regulation are a problem. People wouldn't live with it. But too much regulation are also a problem. There is a perception that we need maximum regulation. We need optimal regulation. And to me, that is the biggest challenge that we have in the scientific community. All of you in finance know that this is a big problem now. And I think in agriculture, it's really big. I think that what we do, for example, is GMO is ridiculous. Some of the endangered species thing have to be restored, not that it has to be abolished. We need to look at the benefit and the cost and to assess the risk. And we need to have a situation that we have a dialogue. Today, we don't have a dialogue. And even though science extended our life to, 80 years or something more, life expectancy, people don't trust it. And to me, it's a tragedy. But developing some sort of a dialogue about regulation is really crucial. The other thing that we have to do is to recognize that we deal with a changing world, so trade pattern and being able to allow new opportunities to take advantage of trade is very important, especially with the Asian market. Opportunities to export to China that are taken, or not China, it's other countries, Indonesia, Pakistan. People in Illinois grew soybean because they start exporting $2 billion worth of soybean to Pakistan. This is not the most advanced country in the world. It's a good market that really allow expansion of the Illinois soybean industry. So being able to take advantage of it is very important. So I said globalization is source of, we have to deal with a new macroeconomy. We deal with the things that is an economy that is more sensitive. And altogether, we realize that agriculture is going a lot of changes. More new technologies, better management practices, industrialization, free trade, new product, new policies, and to some extent, you have to be aware of it. And when you are in the finance industry, to take advantage of it rather than get burned by it. Thank you.
Questions? If you have questions, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. This is for a videotaping purpose. Any questions?
earlier, as far as the commodity trading, do you feel where the producer and the user protect their risk, the forward risk by buying contracts, is being compromised by for-profit traders in agricultural commodities?
I think that hedging is really tricky. What do I mean? If you have information and you know what you're doing, you can do very well. If you don't have information and you hedge a little bit too much or a little too little, you get screwed. So to some extent, if you really don't know what you're doing, it's better to have some sort of a contract with someone else. I think the issue is not so much because it's not so much the commercial speculator versus the hedger. I think the more informed versus the uninformed, the more attentive versus the less attentive. I think the quality of trading among individuals varies, and that results in the fact that a lot of people are losing it. So to some extent, a lot of time, if you really don't feel that you can do it and you can pay, and it's true for me as a professor. I played with it for a short period of time, and then I realized that if I have a lecture, I don't pay attention to the computer and I lose. So to some extent, everyone has to have a relative advantage. So to some extent, if you are a farmer, you have to realize, gosh, what can I do? What can't I do? Sometimes if you have one head that can last for a long time, and basically you can do it. But operating but to me it seems that a lot of farmers assume too much about themselves and underestimate their inability to commit the time to be effective trading. So to some extent, this distinction, obviously there is a big problem that if people, for example, think, okay, the price of, now the only thing that we can use, that you can trade is agricultural commodities, price go up. But you can take advantage of it. The question is you need to be attentive. That's what I feel. Yes?
In your chart in the water section, the heterogeneity is very high crop. Can you talk about that chart and what those numbers mean? For example, you have citrus. It looks like $2 to $4/acre foot. Are you?
Oh man.
And almonds, 500 to 800.
Oh, $2,000 per acre foot, not two. Okay, let me give you an example. Citrus needs about I give you an example that would be easy. Citrus generate revenue of about, I don't know, $6,000 to $8,000 per acre, okay? It needs about 3.5 acre foot, so it generates $2,000 revenue per acre. Almond generate, I don't know, $3,000. So it generates $1,000 per acre. So to some extent, if you look at all the crop, you look at the revenue divided it by acre foot, you can really realize what's going on. So to some extent, you see a big difference. So if you look at, so it may be a typo. See, I start doing it for the State Water Quality Control Board in order to convince them that you need the water bank, because we have some crops that generate incredible amount of value. Now, if you grow flowers in Half Moon Bay, you can pay municipal water $800 per acre foot with no problem. If you grow marijuana some places, you can do the same thing. So it depends on the crop, So a lot depends on the crop. So you really need to, and the other thing, you need to know what is the source of water where you are. There are areas in California that have water for nothing. You have 200 miles, let's say Salinas versus some areas in near North San Joaquin. North San Joaquin, price of water is almost nothing. Salinas, because of different, if you want to use water, let's say for development, you have to pay about $10,000 per acre feet. You need to know about water prices, water opportunities, and if a farmer is smart enough and get access to a new source of water, it can make a big difference.
I would agree. One of the things that we would look at in our organization is if we're in a situation, because after 20 years in the water world, I don't have a lot of faith that it's going to get fixed. then you have to make the decision in a 20% allocation. You cannot economically plan for 20%. I would have to have so much additional acreage or so much additional water assets, the debt would burden the rest of the operation. I would never make money. So I have to farm at a certain balance, but I lay awake at night worrying about the year when it's 20% and the population continues and the urban centers and the environmentalists, that there isn't the support behind farming and they don't agree, like I do with you, that food is fairly important to our continued sustainability. So that's where I was looking at what crops, when I'm in a drought situation, what am I not going to irrigate?
See, that's the reason. See, I tell you, I think, Jay, see what happened is, till 1991, you couldn't use the word trading water in California. It was illegal. We had a conference in Berkeley, and I wanted to tell people why trading water is valuable, so I brought people from Australia and Israel to speak about it. In 1991, there was a big drought, and then they realized that they need to have trading, and we moved to the water bank.
Right.
And I think this will continue. So generally speaking, if you have a drought, you need to have mechanism that people will be able, that high-value crop will be able to get, that people can trade. Because if you grow, I don't know, alfalfa, and you can sell the water to someone that grow peaches, you can make money. Now, the thing that I wouldn't do, I wouldn't lend money to anyone that wouldn't be able, especially perennial, to support a perennial in a year of a drought. If you don't have access to water in drought situation, even expensive water, you're in trouble. So on the other hand, politically I will try to convince people to allow me to deal with it. I think the issues of water, how you deal with endangered species, this will be issue that will shape the state. Now, I think if you try to see what all these issues about the peripheral canal, that's one thing that I think may happen, would really change a lot of this stuff.
I agree, but will we ever get there?
Oh, I think, I tell you one thing, I know that one, I don't think that Brown cares very much about the rail. I personally don't think he cares about it. I think that he feels that he failed with the peripheral canal 30 years ago. He basically told people, I know it, he told people to start planning for it regardless. So I think the peripheral canal will happen. I think the big issue now is who will pay for it. Will it be agriculturalists or cities? And I know that negotiation exists between the two. Agriculture is really bulking. They think, gosh, we don't think that we need it in the city. So there is this element that it's not clear who pays for it, but it will happen. And it will be much cheaper, it will be much more economical. But to me, the big issue is that there is a lot of noise from a lot of the environmental community about it. And I don't think that there have been a lot of determination, because the 60 billion canal that people thought about wasn't feasible from any perspective, but the 25 billion thing that people are speaking now is something that is happening. But to me, really, I think things like this depend a lot of time on, and I think Brown is really crazy about it, because he feels that it's family legacy. So that's my personal assessment, because I've been working with water as a researcher, and you get instructions from people that give you contract. And in the last 15 years, people speak about $60 billion. So to me, it was a canal for developers. There are three types of people that want canal. Developers, they want the biggest canal possible. The cities, and they want a canal that basically solves the problem, in agriculture. And they want a canal conditional on not paying too much. So this is a trick there. And then you have environmentalists that don't want it. So that's a trick there. And I really think that now there are circumstances that it may happen. I'm not sure it will be happen, 25 billion, financial problems, other things, But I think that's something, they speak about something cheaper, and I think the big issue will pay for it. And I think that what happened is that both parties, the cities and agriculture, feel that they don't need it. And that, to me, is a mistake. I think agriculture needs it. I think the city will need it. But both feel we can survive without it. So I think that's a big issue. So my feeling is that we never took too much advantage of trading opportunities in California, and we really didn't have a lot of water. We have once every 10 years there is a water crisis, and generally we found solutions for them. That's the reason that things are moving. And if it wasn't for a lot of the issues of the fish, we would solve a lot of problems anyhow. But I think altogether it will happen. Now, as a lender, it's tricky. You can really support a project that maybe, because where do you lose, what can be the sources of loss? Either that suddenly you have economic conditions that are bad, or that you overestimated an investment. And the biggest overestimation is that you think that something will take 3 years and it takes 10 years. And that are the things that you have to worry about. That's the reason that regulation can be a disaster. Excessive regulation kill you mostly because it takes too much time to settle. And that was the problem with water. Overall, it's not as big problem as in specific cases. Now, personally, I think the biggest problem that I see in banking in California is that you need to have a new generation of people that understand the agricultural economy and understand fine points like this, where you can have a situation that you really loan to someone that wouldn't be able to fulfill what they want, whereas a situation that someone will be quick and effective and it will be repaid. And a lot of time it's difficult because you have a lot of social pressure, you get studies that are not exact, and you really need to know what's going on. If you really only rely, if you don't have the education or the knowledge to understand it, you a lot of time you may lose.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Zilberman, for your great presentation. We will have, let's applaud. Thank you. And we will have a break of 10 minutes. We'll be back at 11.